My name is Elijah Ward. I'm 38 years old, a senior software consultant, and for most of my adult life, I believed in building things slowly, steadily, with loyalty at the center. I don't chase drama or attention. I work hard, I plan carefully, and when I love someone, I go all in. That's how it was with Nadia. We met when she was 25 and working as a receptionist at a dental office. She had big dreams of becoming a healthcare administrator, but not the money to chase them. I saw fire in her eyes, and I wanted to be the one to help her rise. We dated for a year before she even mentioned school. She was cautious, respectful, said she'd been burned by people before who promised to support her, only to leave the minute she needed help. I told her I wasn't like them, and I meant it. When she got accepted into a master's program that cost nearly $30,000, I offered to cover it, not as a loan, not as a test, just as love. She cried in my arms that night, said no one had ever believed in her like I did. I thought I was building our future. I didn't know I was funding my own betrayal. For 2 years I paid for everything, her tuition, her books, her rent when her part-time job fell through. I kept working overtime to keep up with her classes, her needs, her late-night stress breakdowns. I believed we were partners, that once she had her degree, we'd finally start planning the wedding we'd always talked about. And she played along. She still wore the ring, still called me my rock. I didn't notice she'd already started building an exit plan. She graduated, landed a management role at a private clinic, and everything changed almost overnight. Suddenly, I wasn't invited to after-work events. She started dressing differently, talking differently, like she was curating a version of herself that didn't include me. When I asked if we could start wedding plans again, she told me we were in different phases now, that she needed to find herself before getting tied down. I didn't yell. I didn't beg, but inside, something went cold. The worst part came when she was asked to speak on a panel about career breakthroughs. She invited me. I sat in the front row, proud, until she told the audience that her journey was built on self-discipline and hard work, and that she had no fallback, no help, just grit. No mention of me, not once. I was the one who made it possible, and I was erased in front of 100 strangers. That night, something inside me cracked, but I didn't show it. She thought she'd replaced me with a better version of her life. Newer friends, fancier events, a curated image of struggle turned success. But she didn't know that I never stop what I start, and if I built her future, I knew exactly where its weakest beams were hidden. Looking back now, the signs were there long before that panel. They were small things at first. Subtle withdrawals, private glances at her phone, a new password I was never told. Nadia started pulling away in fragments. She still smiled, still kissed my cheek in public, still posted photos of us on social media like we were fine. But in private, I was becoming a ghost in my own home. Conversations dried up. Questions about her day were met with vague one-word answers. She always looked distracted, like her mind was in a place she wouldn't let me follow. There was a moment, 2 months before the panel, that sticks in my memory like a nail under the skin. I had cooked dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and roasted vegetables. She stared at her plate like it offended her. "I just need someone who inspires me more," she said, out of nowhere. I asked what that meant. She didn't answer. Instead, she got up, left the food untouched, and went to bed. I spent the rest of the night at the kitchen table, trying to remember where the woman I had supported had gone. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. My friends warned me, quietly, respectfully. They said I was giving too much, sacrificing too much. One of them, Jason, even told me over a drink, "Man, she's using you as a bridge. When she gets across, she's gonna burn it." I didn't want to hear it. I defended her. I told them love meant standing by someone while they built their dream. What I didn't see was that she wasn't building with me, she was building away from me. I started feeling ashamed, though I didn't know why. I made excuses for her absence, her coldness, told myself she was just stressed, that her new role was demanding, that maybe she was just growing, and I needed to grow with her. But deep down, I knew she wasn't just outgrowing me, she was preparing to leave me behind. And worse, she wanted to do it while standing on the platform I paid for, smiling, like she'd climbed the mountain alone. When she came home late one night, smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't hers, I didn't confront her. I just sat in bed, quiet, calculating. If I had spoken then, I might have broken. But instead, I stored the feeling, turned it into fuel. Because something inside me had shifted. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to wait and watch. She didn't know it yet, but she had already given me everything I needed to dismantle the new life she was building. Every receipt, every shared password, every careless secret whispered into a cloud service she thought I'd forgotten about. She thought I was weak because I stayed silent, but I wasn't broken. I was preparing. I started with the small things, the things she assumed I'd forgotten. An old shared Dropbox folder she never removed me from. A digital receipt from a luxury weekend getaway she claimed was a conference. A recurring charge on my card for a gym membership 2 cities over. Each clue layered over the next until a clear picture began to form. She wasn't just stepping away from me emotionally, she was already in something new. A new man, a new life. And all of it was stitched together with threads I paid for. I never let on that I knew. I still cooked. I still asked about her day. I still smiled when we passed in the hallway. But inside, I was rewiring the entire foundation. I started logging expenses, the tuition transfers, the rent payments, the professional wardrobe she bought on my dime. I spoke to a friend of mine, a corporate auditor, who advised me to catalog everything, just in case. He looked at me and said, "She may not owe you emotionally, but if you play this right, she'll owe you legally and professionally." Then came the moment that changed everything. I discovered that Nadia had listed her degree on LinkedIn as self-financed through hardship and independent work. That was the moment I decided this wouldn't just end with her walking away. It would end with her remembering, every time she stepped into her office, that the walls around her had my name carved into the foundation, invisible but indestructible. I started working with a lawyer quietly, not out of vengeance, but out of precision. I wanted to make sure I was within every boundary. I wasn't going to destroy her with rage. I was going to use the truth. She had one Achilles heel. Her clinic job was funded by a non-profit grant program that explicitly required full disclosure of financial aid or sponsorship. If she had omitted the truth about how she obtained her education, it wasn't just dishonest. It was a violation of the terms. I had documentation, timestamps, bank transfers, messages where she promised to pay me back eventually. And now, it was time to gather it into something she couldn't deny or spin. I made copies of everything, cloud backups, encrypted drives, printed binders. I wasn't planning to go public. I wasn't interested in shaming her, but I wanted leverage. I wanted the quiet knowledge that when the time came, I could take away the one thing she thought I couldn't touch, her future. And all the while she laughed and flirted, and lived like she was untouchable. That's the most dangerous lie people tell themselves, that the person they betrayed won't do anything because they haven't yet. But I wasn't doing nothing. I was building the quietest storm she'd never see coming. It happened gradually. She started to sense the change, though she couldn't name it. I wasn't colder, I was calmer. I stopped asking where she was going, and she mistook it for detachment. What she didn't realize was that silence can be strategy. I wasn't interested in her answers anymore. I was watching her movements, patterns, behavior. I had shifted from being her support system to being her observer, and the more confident she became, the more careless her behavior turned. She came home late one night, laughing at a voice memo on her phone. She didn't see me standing behind the kitchen door, listening. A man's voice said, "So, when are you going to be done with that engineer and come live like you were meant to?" She giggled and said, "Soon, babe, he's clueless," and that, somehow, didn't hurt. It confirmed what I already knew. She thought I was nothing more than a step she'd outgrown. But she didn't know I'd already finished the blueprint of her downfall. I scheduled a quiet meeting with her employer's compliance officer. I didn't show up angry. I showed up with a leather folder, labeled documents, and a very calm tone. I explained that I had fully funded her degree, that her grant application had explicitly stated otherwise, and that this might be a serious concern if they ever faced an audit. I made no threats. I simply handed over the facts. I didn't smear her name. I let the truth do the work for me. It was surgical, and more than anything, it was fair. 2 weeks later, I noticed the signs of panic. She was suddenly spending hours on her laptop, muttering about HR protocol and grant documentation. She asked me, casually, if I still had copies of those old tuition payments. I shrugged, said I'd probably deleted them. She was trying to get ahead of something, but didn't know what was already behind her. It was only a matter of time now, and I was no longer the man waiting for her to come home. I was the man she had to pretend she hadn't underestimated. Then came the day she broke down. She sat on the edge of the bed and said her position was under review, that someone had sent misleading information about her application history. She started crying, asking if I knew anything about it. I looked her in the eye and said, "All I ever did was help you. Maybe someone finally noticed." That was the beginning of her unraveling. No yelling, no revenge speeches, just silence. She looked at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time, but it was too late. The man she stepped on was gone. The man standing in front of her was in control, and he didn't need to raise his voice to break her world apart. Her professional world started collapsing in quiet, bureaucratic waves. The clinic launched a formal investigation into her grant credentials. Her supervisor called her into closed-door meetings she wouldn't talk about. The smiles stopped. The confidence drained from her face like ink in water, and I just watched. I made her tea in the evenings. I asked how her day went. I never mentioned the truth. I didn't need to. She was slowly drowning in a mess of her own design, and she had no idea I was the one who lit the fuse. The final blow came from the non-profit that funded her education grant. I had forwarded all evidence, gently, professionally, with a note saying I thought they might want to ensure their limited funds were going to applicants who followed the rules. I never signed my name. I let the documentation speak for itself. 3 weeks later, I found the envelope on the kitchen counter, opened, her hands shaking. Her funding had been revoked retroactively. Not only that, but her employer was now reviewing whether she had obtained her job through fraudulent means. The foundation of her new life, built on lies, was caving in. She stopped sleeping. I could hear her pacing the hall at night. The confident woman who once stood on a stage claiming self-made success now stared blankly at a wall, trying to calculate how fast her future was slipping away. And yet, I never said, "I told you so." I never even raised my voice. My revenge wasn't explosive. It was slow, intelligent, and most importantly, eventually, she came to me. Not with an apology, not with humility, but with a desperate request. "Can you help me fix this? Maybe if you write a letter saying you were just being supportive, not involved in the degree itself, it would help." I looked at her for a long time. I supported you, I said quietly. That part was never a lie. Everything else? That's on you. Then I walked away. She moved out 2 weeks later. No grand goodbye, no final blowout, just a hastily packed suitcase and a door that closed a little too gently behind her. She never asked for the ring back. She didn't even look me in the eye. In the end, she didn't leave with dignity. She left with nothing. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just sat alone in the living room that used to be filled with plans and promises, and looked around at the silence she left behind. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. It's been over a year since she walked out. Sometimes I still catch echoes of her in the apartment, the scent of her old perfume caught in a scarf left behind, the hum of her favorite song playing somewhere in public. But those moments don't cut like they used to. They land softly now, like reminders of a season that changed me, not with rage, but with revelation. I learned that betrayal doesn't always show up with knives and shouting. Sometimes it arrives with borrowed dreams, whispered lies, and eyes that look at you like a stepping stone instead of a partner. People often think that revenge needs to be loud, dramatic, humiliating. But what I gave her wasn't revenge. It was accountability, the slow unraveling of a narrative she built out of stolen credit. She had crafted a fantasy where she pulled herself up from nothing, but I was the scaffolding she quietly erased. And when I removed my support, everything collapsed. Not because I attacked her, but because the truth doesn't need to scream to bring a house of lies down. Since then, I've rebuilt piece by piece. Not just my bank account, which took a hit I'm still recovering from, but my trust, my focus, my sense of self. I learned to say no. I stopped giving all of myself to people who only show up when it's convenient. I've started going back to the gym, cooking for myself again. And more than anything, I've started listening to that voice inside me. I once silenced the one that warned me before the damage was done. She sent me one message months later. No apology, just, I wish things had gone differently. I didn't reply. What was there to say? I already gave her the most dignified ending someone like her could receive. Silence. She'll carry the consequences of what she did every time she sits in another interview and has to explain the gaps in her resume, the revoked grant, the ethical investigation. Those things don't fade quickly in her world, and she'll always know I was the one who didn't break, didn't beg, just walked away with the truth on my side. There's a strange kind of peace that comes from quiet revenge, the kind that doesn't scream or demand closure. I never sought to ruin her life. I just stopped protecting the lies she built it on, and now I sleep well. Not because I won, but because I remembered who I am. And that was worth every penny. I thought once she left, things would quiet down. But I had underestimated just how far the consequences of her deceit would travel. A few months later, a former co-worker of hers reached out to me through LinkedIn. He didn't say much, just that Nadia had burned a lot of bridges and that people were starting to put the pieces together. Turns out mine wasn't the only story she had tried to rewrite. There were whispers that she had falsified parts of her resume, inflated past roles, even plagiarized a few professional papers. The truth was surfacing faster than I expected. Still, I said nothing publicly. I let the rumors take their course. I had no need to confirm or deny anything. Her downfall wasn't mine to direct anymore. It had taken on a life of its own. Meanwhile, I focused inward. Therapy helped. So did journaling. And slowly I began reconnecting with the version of myself I had buried to support her, the man who didn't just exist in service to someone else's ambition. That man was sharper now, wiser. He didn't romanticize potential, he watched actions. He moved quietly, but with purpose. I ran into her once, At a downtown cafe we used to visit, she looked thinner, paler, and when our eyes met, she hesitated. I gave her a polite nod and kept walking. There was nothing left to say. She used to walk into that place with a head full of dreams and a heart full of ambition. Now, she looked like someone who had finally realized the price of stepping on the very hand that once held her steady. I didn't feel smug. I didn't even feel sorry. I felt nothing. Friends who once questioned my silence now understood it. "You handled that like a king," one of them said. But it wasn't about looking noble. It was about surviving with my integrity intact. I didn't destroy her. She destroyed herself when she chose shortcuts over truth. I had simply stepped out of the way and let gravity finish what her ego had started. In the mirror, I started seeing someone stronger than before. Not colder, just clearer, and that clarity became my peace. By the time the new year arrived, her name barely echoed in my thoughts. Not out of bitterness, but out of freedom. I had stopped checking her socials. I had stopped rehearsing old conversations in my head. The version of me that once revolved around her approval, her dreams, her emotions, he no longer existed. I didn't need closure from her. I had closure from within. That's the thing about healing on your own terms. You don't need permission. You just need distance and the discipline to choose peace over pain. I poured myself into work. Picked up 2 passion projects I had abandoned during her rise, one being a tech mentorship program for underprivileged youth, the other a side business I'd shelved while she was in school. Both gave me something she never did, fulfillment without conditions, and as those parts of my life expanded, something inside me opened up too. For the first time in years, I started imagining a future that wasn't tied to anyone else's ambition, a future built for me. People often assume that when you walk away from a betrayal like that, there's a need to fill the void with someone new. But I didn't rush into another relationship. I wanted solitude to be enough again, and it was. I found joy in slow mornings, in solo trips, in conversations with people who didn't expect me to fund their evolution. My standards had shifted. My spirit had changed. I still believed in love, but I would never again confuse love with sacrifice that goes only one way. One evening, I received a message request from her new number. Just 3 words. "I'm truly sorry." I didn't open it. I didn't block her either. I just let it sit there, unread, untouched. That message wasn't for me. It was for her. A way to ease her conscience, maybe. But I didn't owe her that ease. What I had given was already more than most would. What I had lost, I had already rebuilt. Her apology wouldn't fix anything, and I didn't need it to. In silence, I had won. Not just against her betrayal, but against the part of me that once accepted it. That was the real victory. Some people think revenge means watching the person who hurt you beg for forgiveness, but real power, lasting power, is when they don't even know how much they've lost until it's too late to get it back. That's where she is now, still spinning stories, still trying to erase the parts of her past that don't fit the image she wants to project. But there's one truth she can never escape. The life she tried to build on borrowed loyalty collapsed the moment she walked away from the man who built it. I have built something better since. Not louder, not flashier, just real. I've reclaimed my time, my name, and my direction. The people in my life now value truth, not performance. And I've learned to do something I hadn't done in years. Trust myself. That might be the most radical thing of all. To come out of a betrayal, not hardened, but refined. I didn't become cruel. I didn't become cold. I became conscious. Occasionally someone who knew us both will ask, "Whatever happened to her?" And I'll just smile and say, "She taught me the price of building someone else's dream before protecting my own." That's all the story they need. because the ending isn't about her anymore. It's about me, about what I walked through, what I carried, and what I laid down once I realized I deserved more than being someone's invisible backbone. She burned a bridge, thinking I was standing still on the other side, but I had already crossed, already risen, already moved so far beyond her reach that even her regrets couldn't follow. I didn't need to ruin her life. I just needed to stop being the one saving it. And in that quiet, steady truth, I found something she never will: peace.